Paul Hughes is fighting at the SSC Arena in Belfast, Northern Ireland on May 10th against Bruno. Good, big news. Paul Hughes is back fighting May 10th at the SSC Arena in Belfast, Northern Ireland against Bruno Miranda. This is a big fight. It's good that Paul Hughes is coming back in just about a little under 5 months here for PFL. This is big news for the PFL. They really need Paul Hughes to be active. He is their really only major star at this point in time. And this stardom was really born officially in January with his fight against Usman Nurmagomedov. So far, the fight of the year in 2025, and the toughness that Paul Hughes displayed, the optics of the blood pouring down his face, waving Usman to fight him, taking who person that we believe to be MMA's best prospect right now, who could be the future of the sport, the best in the Nurmagomedov family, the best of the Dagestani fighters, and to take him to the brink shows how good and how elite Paul Hughes is. And Paul Hughes has resonated with so many people so quickly. He has gained so many fans so quickly. That's big for the PFL. But it's important that the UFC takes note of that. You don't just have to get talent into your organization via the Dana White Contender Series, which I don't think is the best judge of who the most talented guys are, given how high stakes and how much pressure goes into that performance. Diego Lopez lost in the Dana White Contender Series. He's getting a title fight now, UFC 314, 2 years later. That's because he took a fight on short notice, but a short notice fight to the Dana White Contender Series on how to get into the UFC. Paul Hughes could have entered the UFC, but the PFL offered him a better entry level contract. The UFC's entry level contract isn't all that great. Paul Hughes would not have been able to make as much noise as he's had in the UFC in the 9 months that he's had with the PFL. Couldn't have been done. The UFC wouldn't have given him the likes of AJ McKee or Usman Nurmagomedov or what their counterparts are in the UFC organization. He wouldn't have fought two top five UFC fighters already. Not a chance. And it's just the excitement level around Paul Hughes while the UFC is struggling with stars and being criticized for not having enough stars. They could have had Paul Hughes. Will they have Paul Hughes eventually? Probably. The best of the best always want to go to the UFC to make that life-changing money, to prove they are the best. Because the elite of the elite are in the UFC. There's some really good fighters in the PFL who would be top five in their division in the UFC. AJ McKee, Usman Nurmagomedov. I think Paul Hughes could probably enter a top five lightweight conversation very quickly. Luke Thomas is wrong. The next era of the lightweights will live up to this generation of lightweights, the Poiriers, the Oliveras, the Gaethjes, the Chandlers. Paul Hughes is that guy. Ilia Topuria is that guy as well. Paul Hughes, Paddy Pimblett, that's going to be a hell of a fight one day for the UFC. Paul Hughes, Usman Nurmagomedov, that's going to be a great rematch for the PFL. I bet the UFC runs that back. We're not going to see that just one more time. But this fight in May is really important. You imagine on paper Bruno Miranda, losing two of his last three fights. That's someone that Paul Hughes will be able to put away. But that's a win that he can have for that rematch to happen sooner. It was 3, 4 fights. He gets a rematch. Now it's one fight. He'll give him the rematch. I think Usman Nurmagomedov wants that rematch really bad now because Paul Hughes has gotten all the attention and he wants to shut the people up. He wants to prove that he is better than Paul Hughes because I don't know if he necessarily proved that despite getting the win. I have never seen a fighter's stock rise as much as Paul Hughes did following a loss. I mean, that was incredible. He won over so many people with that viral moment of the blood pouring down his face, waving Usman to keep fighting. It was a special moment for the PFL. Didn't last too long for them. They are the little brother after all. But they have a guy to build around in Paul Hughes. And that rematch needs to happen. And I do think it needs to happen in 2025. I think this is something that has to be booked for the fall. Because I think the moment Islam Makhachev moves up and leaves the lightweight division, which I think is at any point now. I think it's one more fight at lightweight and he's gone at most. If Bilal loses in May, I think Islam says, I want to go up to 170. I think that's something the UFC would grant him. He has the most title defenses out of any other champion right now. How can you say no to him? How can you say no, fight Ilia Topuria? No, fight Arman Tsarukyan again. No, fight Charles Oliveira again. It's probably best for the lightweight division that Islam Makhachev does leave. Minus the fact that we wouldn't get that Topuria Makhachev fight. But the second that happens, I think Nurmagomedov comes over to the UFC. That's an interesting fight. Those will be interesting fights for him to see how he translates to the UFC because he's already been a champion in other promotion. I think that's a fast title run. That's a fast track to the title right there. It'll be really interesting to watch that. And the lightweight division and how it plays out is going to be super exciting. But those lightweight stars are there. Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov are there. They need to fight again. And giving Paul Hughes the opportunity to fight in his hometown, to get that win, to get that rematch is a big deal. It's going to be a fight that I'm going to watch because how do you not want to watch Paul Hughes fight again after what we just watched in January? I can't wait to see that fight. But Hughes and Nurmagomedov needs to happen. Best fight that we've seen in 2025 to this point. Boxing, MMA, UFC, PFL. It's the best fight we've seen in combat sports in 2025 to this point. Most competitive fight we've seen to this point. Needs to happen again. And it will happen again at some point in time, but it needs to happen this year. For the PFL's sake. For Paul Hughes' sake. And if it wasn't going to happen immediately, I do think I would have liked to have seen Paul Hughes enter this PFL tournament. It's kind of a weird thing, this PFL tournament, tournament to see who the best of the best was. I know it starts in April. Give Paul Hughes a bye. Make the rules up as you go. He's your biggest star. UFC does this stuff all the time. If you want to legitimize your business model, have Paul Hughes in it. You can't have a best lightweight in the world tournament for the PFL without Nurmagomedov or Hughes. And Nurmagomedov wasn't going to do it. Paul Hughes would have. Paul Hughes would. 2026, he needs to be in that tournament. Needs to be. But I want to know what you guys think in the comments of the UFC star problem potentially. Should Paul Hughes have been with the UFC sooner? I sure think so. What can the UFC do differently to acquire talent such as Paul Hughes quicker? I do think he goes over there eventually. Let me know what you think of Paul Hughes and Bruno Miranda in the comments below. It's going to be a great opportunity for Paul Hughes to fight in front of his home crowd. And let me know what you think Paul Hughes' chances are in a rematch with Usman Nurmagomedov. I want to hear from you guys. And thank you for watching. And please like and subscribe to the Interim Title Show and follow us on Instagram at Interim Title Show.